Welcome to the June 13th, 2019 Special Reston Association Board of Directors meeting being held as a work session with the Design Review Board. To establish quorum, I'd like it if the RA directors would state their name and their district. Doug, we'll start down at your end.
Doug Britt, at large. Tom Mulcairn, at large. Aaron Webb, Lake Ann, Tulloch.
Karen Anton, Hunters Woods Dogwood.
John Mooney, North Point.
Julie Bitzer, South Lakes.
Kathy Bauman, I'm the president. And now if all of the DRB could introduce themselves.
Sure. We have another board.
Veneral.
Oh, someone else can do it.
Oh, Ven, I'm sorry.
Ben Ayer, RA Board at Large Director.
Thank you.
Richard Newland, the DRB Chair.
Neil Roseberry, DRB Vice Chair.
Ken Knieven, DRB Vice Chair.
Charlie Hoffman, DOB member. Nick Georges, DRB Vice Chair.
Bruce Graymo, DRB member.
Michael Wood, DRB architect member.
Okay, staff can go ahead and introduce themselves.
Come on.
Anthony Champ, General Counsel.
Jessica Fuentes, Board Committee and Legal Liaison. Anna Donato, Director of Covenants Administration.
Larry Felder, Chief Operating Officer.
Nick Lake, CEO.
Okay, I'm going to go through the purpose of this special meeting in just a couple of minutes here, but I need to address a few things that have happened this week. There were some articles in the Reston Now newspaper that left the impression that staff had been interviewed and had made some inappropriate comments. Staff did not speak to Reston Now. And then yesterday, they decided to do a poll article, which appeared to come from the Reston Association, and it was designed, as far as I was concerned, to stir the pot of negative comments from unhappy residents. So, irresponsible journalism or journalists have no place in this community. And there were, nasty comments, positive comments, et cetera, but the articles were not good, and our communications director did send an email to address it to Reston Now. So this meeting is a result of a presentation by Covenants at the May board meeting. After that meeting was held, we had another one with Hank Lynch, Ann Votto, Julie Bitzer, myself, Richard, Neil, Ken Knieven, and Nick Georges. And some serious concerns were expressed by DRB members, so we decided to hold this meeting. Just to summarize a little bit, Covenants is tasked with supporting the DRB as well as enforcing use and maintenance. DRB has been part of the fabric of Reston since the first legal documents forming this original association. Members of this board, meaning the RA board, and Covenant staff, by virtue of our positions, believe that preserving the design integrity, architectural quality, and aesthetic character are part of what makes Reston a desirable place to live. Further, we understand that the association documents state that we shall, as a board, provide adequate funding and staff support for the operations of the DRB. That doesn't mean that we have an open checkbook, as we are responsible to members. So for tonight, we want to discuss the challenges going on at DRB, the DRB process changes, recommended procedural staff changes. And with that, I'll turn it over to Richard.
Thanks, Kathy. I just had a couple of things I wanted to say. I wrote them down so I can keep it brief, not hem and haw too much. I'm the current chair of the Reston Design Review Board. I've been on the DRB for 20 years now, so it's been a long time. I've been a Reston resident for 30 years, and I've lived through 4 CEOs, Jerry Valoy, Milton Matthews, Kate Fulkerson, and now Hank Lynch. I've seen RA budgets increase and decrease, with member services vacillating with each rise and fall. I've seen over 50 members of the RA board come and go over those 20 years, and the Covenant staff is completely turned over with each new CEO, completely. They get a new director, they get new staff, and pretty much new direction and emphasis. Tonight we'll be discussing a staffing crisis that is tending to focus on one of our member services granted in Reston's governing documents, design review. I'll have more to say later during the discussion period, but please note, the point is simple. Reston's governing documents require the Design Review Board to function as stated in that document, with staff support and a proper budget. If this support is not provided, the answer is not to curtail the DRB process, but to fix the systemic problem of staffing and budget. Any discussion of reducing the DRB function is simply not germane to the current staffing crisis. We'll do what we can to help on a temporary basis, and we've already suggested several ways to assist without diluting the design review process. Along with the 3 vice chairs, as Kathy referenced, 2 weeks ago roughly, we met with the new CEO, Anna, legal counsel, RA's legal counsel, Larry Butler, and RA board members, Kathy and Julie Bitzer. Our helpful suggestions of assistance after that 2-hour meeting have basically been ignored. Our goal is to keep Reston strong and a wonderful place to call home through the efforts of the Design Review Board and the design review process. This not only benefits our property values, that's key, but creates our Reston oasis that we enjoy. A proper budget and staffing is paramount to keeping Reston, our members and amenities working as originally planned. The RA Board and other programs require the same level of support, if not more, that the DRB has historically benefited from. We look forward to discussing this in more detail after we hear the staff crisis report and their suggestions for a solution. Thank you.
Okay. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second? All the ayes?
Aye.
Noes? Abstentions? Motion carries. I believe we have a member to make a comment.
Yep.
If you would step to the podium, give us your name and address, please.
So these are member comments to your special meeting. I'm speaking as an individual, RA member and Hickory Cluster Association member. And my name is Michael Post. I have a Master of Architecture degree and I live at 11557 Maple Ridge Road here in Reston. The following comments are based on my more than 30 years of education experience in architecture, engineering, real estate acquisition, asset management, management consulting, and information technology, in addition to more than a 10-year investment in preserving significant Reston modern architecture and property values as a Hickory Cluster homeowner and member of the board of directors. One issue I see here is related to Reston architecture preservation. Much of the essence of Reston continues to be embodied in founder Robert E. Simon Jr.'s built vision of significant works of modern architecture designed by significant modern architects, including Lake Ann Village Center, Hickory Cluster, Waterview Cluster, Colson Cluster, Golf Course Island, some private residences, and USGS National Center. RA, DRB, and Covenant's teams help preserve significant Reston modern architecture, and hopefully they will continue to do so. So thank you, Anna and Company and Richard and Company. However, sometimes the process is designed to preserve it fully or partially fail at every level, whether through building owner neglect that degrades as-built architectural and historic integrity, standards or processes that allow degradation to persist, and limited government awareness and protections. Another issue, RA walkthroughs for use and maintenance only, which is slide 19 on your presentation package. Clusters cannot enforce RA DRB design guidelines or develop cluster standards for every building element. Cluster enforcement of even cluster standards results in retaliation by angry, non-compliant neighbors who choose not to fulfill their governing document responsibilities, and that's close to home. If RA DRB neglects future design enforcement, most Reston modern architecture clusters and other buildings will be defenseless and their architectural integrity will be destroyed building by building. This is what we are up against. This is from a Facebook page a comment written by Blake Travis, who was a former Hickory Cluster board member. Yes, push back on everything. They never followed up on actions they told me to take. So drag it out as long as possible and even request a second DRB hearing to resolve your outstanding items. Quite simply, bog them down with paperwork and follow-up inspections. They don't have the time or resources to stick with it, and it'll probably end up being shelved. This was just prior to the cluster inspections that the cluster board of directors requested of RADRB, for which most of us in the community were very glad to see. Recommendations on comments, the issues I just mentioned. Number one, continue to perform walkthrough inspections with diligent follow-up to enforce cluster standards and design guidelines, RA design guidelines. Two, significant modern architecture likely requires much more application, inspection, and follow-up RA resources than other more generic clusters and buildings. If RA increases full-time RA DRB staff, please consider tasking one staff member to focus specifically on significant Reston modern architecture cluster and buildings. This will reduce the workload of other staff members, make RA DRB and Covenants teams more effective overall, and help preserve all remaining modern architecture in Reston and property values. Thanks for your consideration. I'll be glad to answer questions now or later.
Thank you for joining us.
Madam Chairman? Sir, could we have a copy of your comments?
I just so happen.
Thank you.
I've got it electronically too if you want to.
You want to give them to Jessica?
If you give it to our secretary, assistant secretary.
Thank you.
Okay, Anna?
Good evening, everyone. So the intent tonight is for me to give you an overview of the Covenants Department functions. I realize that several of you have already seen this presentation, so I will be as succinct as possible. Can you hear me?
Barely.
Barely.
Yeah, barely.
The microphone is
It
on,
came on
but
really strong for a minute there, but then it went away.
can you?
So the microphones really are for the stream. The way the room is configured, it would create too much of a feedback in order to have it reinforce itself. Forgive me.
Okay. I'll try to talk as loud as I can. So like I said, I know several of you have already seen this presentation, so I will try to be as succinct as possible while giving you the highlights. The first, why isn't this working? Okay. So the first slide gives you information, obviously, on the RA mission and the department goal, the Covenants Department goal to ensure the beauty and harmony of our community. And obviously why the Covenants Department does what we do, primarily to preserve the property values and to ensure that we abide by deadlines that are mandated by the RA governing documents and the Virginia statute. This slide I provided for, I know that sometimes there are challenges with understanding the distinction between what is covered under design and under use and maintenance. So primarily under design, what's covered is this focus on preserving the architectural integrity in the community, within the whole community, harmony of the exterior appearance of the proposed improvement or alteration, the location of the improvement, definitely the character of the proposed use and the effect upon the surrounding property, character, aesthetics, and quality of materials. Use and maintenance focuses on the ongoing upkeep and physical condition of the property and the specific use of property. So use of property would be if somebody, say, was trying to run a business from their home. Maintenance of improvements would be anything that would fall under things such as if there's fallen fences, spalled stucco, rotted trim, discolored siding, fallen shingles, things of that nature would fall under maintenance on property. Overgrown vegetation, refuse and debris, obstruction, boats, harmful discharge, any of those items would be under use and maintenance. And obviously, all of that then is on staff to balance, to make sure that there's a balance on making sure that both of those areas are equally handled and managed with the help, obviously, of the overseen by Design Review Board and Covenants Committee. This slide provides an overview of the current structure of the Covenants team. We have 15 full-time employees, including myself. It provides an idea. The main idea here is to give you a sense of the fact that everybody and every team that we have handles multiple tasks. Aside from the resale team that is handling primarily the resale orders, every team is handling multiple tasks. So the DRB team, for example, who handles the DRB staffing for the meetings, oversees the quality check of the DRB applications before they're presented to the DRB, is also managing non-residential properties, apartments, and condominiums. So they not only process the applications for those, but they also do inspections for those properties. They also do the resale requests for the commercial properties, or estoppel requests, as we call those. We have a DRB post-project inspector who, that position was implemented last year, who is going out to inspect projects after they've been approved to ensure that they're being installed in compliance with the DRB decisions. She's also assisting with walkthroughs and other inspections. We have 6 advisors who are managing all of the RA resident, or all of the RA properties, as well as the residential properties. They're processing applications, they're updating cluster standards, they're meeting with members, they're doing walkthroughs. The legal and covenants committee teams are facilitating the covenants and legal committee teams meetings. They're processing all the complaints that are submitted by members, doing inspections, they're managing some residential properties and doing walkthroughs. And of course, the resale team, based on the volume of orders that we get, are primarily handling the resales. This is a list of the primary functions handled through the Covenants Department. I won't go through the entire list, but it gives you an idea of the tasks and how much time it takes to process all those tasks. For example, on processing applications, it could be anywhere from an hour to 16 hours per application by each advisor, based on whether the application is submitted complete, with all the complete documentation, or whether the advisor's having to go back and forth with the homeowner for additional information. I have on there the estoppel certificates, which is the commercial resale certificates. Those could take 90 hours per project. The resale certificates for commercial projects could be for several buildings in an apartment complex. So those are very complex and can take that long to process. This is the DRB meeting structure as it currently stands. We have 3 panel meetings a month and 1 full DRB meeting per month. The 3 panel meetings every Tuesday, they can go from 45 minutes. We've actually had some that could be 30 minutes to 2 hours. There's 1 staff member at those meetings, and then the full DRB meeting. 2 staff members at those meetings, because usually we have more complex presentations. It takes 2 staff members to navigate, 1 to navigate the presentations and 1 taking minutes. They could be 2 hours. We've had some as short as 1 hour, but on average they've been 2 hours. Lately, we've had some that have been as long as 4 hours. We haven't had any as long as that lately, but they could be 2 to 3 hours. Preparation time for those meetings. On the meeting manager side, they're spending 20 to 30 hours a week preparing for those. Primarily, it's to making sure they're reviewing the applications, to make sure they're ready to be reviewed by the Design Review Board. They're preparing the packets, they're preparing the meeting minutes in advance of the meeting, and then issuing the meeting minutes after the fact. They're issuing decision letters afterwards. They're basically trying to get ready for the meeting, and because we're usually averaging about 8 to 12 applications per meeting, they're ensuring that all the meeting information is ready for the DRB. And then the advisors, like I said earlier, they're spending 1 to 16 hours per application, reviewing the application submitted by the members, ensuring they're complete, and working with the members for the submission of those applications. This is the structure for the covenants and legal committee meetings. The covenants committee meetings are once per month, as well as the legal committee meetings. Legal committee meetings are not occurring as often as once per month. We've been running about once per quarter. The covenants committee meetings are about an hour to an hour and a half, and we have 2 staff members there. Legal committee meetings are running 30 minutes to an hour, 2 staff members there as well. And the preparation time is about 2 to 3 days with 2 staff members. They're doing inspections throughout the month, and then they're also doing inspections with the covenants committee members the Monday before the Wednesday meeting. They're also issuing the hearing notices to the homeowners. They're inspecting properties, preparing case outlines, and again, they're preparing for the meeting minutes and decision letters. This is average time spent on the processing of DRB applications. This is almost a snapshot in a day in the life of an advisor. We received 2,097 DRB applications in 2018 that were processed. We have 6 advisors processing. On average, 6 applications per week. That's the annual average. But right now, during the busy time of year, we usually have 12 to 15 applications on every advisor's desk. So we've calculated an average of 4.5 hours processing time. Earlier I said it could be 1 to 16 hours, so I've taken an average of 4.5 hours. So that means that the advisors are spending 31.5 hours per week on DRB applications. That only leaves 8.5 hours a week for other tasks. And that's been calculated on literally time spent, 40 hours, them being there every day, not taking a lunch break, not ever taking any leave. So there's not much time left for anything other than processing DRB application as it stands right now. In 2017, we received 1,835 applications, and in 2016, 1,904. Unfortunately, the software we were using before the one that we have currently did not provide statistics, so we do not have statistics for the years prior to that.
Is it okay to ask questions as
Sure.
we go along here? I mean, when you're talking about the DRB applications, on one of your previous slides, you said there were only 98 DRB applications. With the 15 people you have in your department, all 15 of them aren't doing that, right? It's only certain members, like 3 or 4 of them, that are actually spending 30 hours a week, or are all 15 of your people doing this?
I would say that the 6 advisors are spending the 31.5 hours.
Okay,
Other
so-
individuals are processing applications, they're probably not spending the 31.5 hours
Okay.
doing applications. This is the same idea, but on resale orders. In order to go from, by the time you do the inspection, the property research, and compiling the report, it could take 1.5 hours to 8 hours to process a resale packet. So the potential, we received 1,111 resale orders in 2018. So if you take the average of 4 hours for each packet, in 2018, receiving 1,111 orders, it could have taken 4,444 hours. We have 2 employees working for that team. Each employee per year works 2,080 hours. So they're working a total of 4,160 hours. So here, basically, what it's telling you that we're barely meeting our requirement with the 4,160 hours if we need to process orders to meet that 4,444 hours. So we're literally, we have to process orders in 14 days based on the legal requirement. I would say, in my own mind, to provide 100% customer service, we should try to deliver before the 14 days, because sometimes people want to get a settlement quicker. But right now, we literally are providing the documents in 14 days. This is feedback that I've received over time in terms of what has been requested by the board that they would like us to do more of. More cluster walkthroughs, walkthroughs for single-family properties, more collaboration with clusters to update cluster standards, complete the digitization of the cluster standard books. And an idea that was floated last year was doing pre-resale inspections. And staff has suggested that we offer that at a fee and provide a staff member that could be paid, through that fee that we charge. Right now, we would not have the resources to add that additional inspection, but that would be to prepare the home, help the members prepare the home for sale before requesting the resale inspection. So I've just recently been asked, what do we think has significantly changed over the last 10 years or more or so? So I put in a few things that I felt were significant. Quality of and detail of DRB applications and DRB decision letters. So over the last 15 to 30 years, the level of detail that's been required for DRB applications submitted, as well as the decision, has significantly increased. I don't know, I wasn't here 30 years ago or even 15 years ago. I can't speak to that. There's probably people here that can. But I can tell you that I did pull information to kind of refer back to what has changed. And in 1988, for example, in 1994, the applications were one page. I didn't make all these copies, but I can tell you and show you that the applications were one page or 2 pages. So this is an application from 1988. It's basically one page, and then there's just another page with some text in it. And there was just the attachment was just a plat survey. There was not a decision letter sent after it. It was just stamped approved. And then the application with the approved stamped, I don't know if you guys can see it down here. You can pass it down if you want. The application with the approved stamp was sent back to the homeowner to show them that the application was approved. And then over time, the process changed, and now the application is anywhere from, I would say, 12 pages to, on Tuesday, there was an application reviewed, and it was 54 pages. So there's been a significant increase in the amount of detail. The application was recently changed primarily to attach a checklist for the homeowner so that they know clearly what to submit with the application. But it's really been, over time, the amount of detail that's been requested from the homeowner in terms of elevation drawings, maps, current condition, proposed condition. And so this is the equivalent of what the types of applications are now. And like I said, it's anywhere between 12 and 54 pages for a panel application. So when you're going from 1 or 2 pages to 12 to 54, obviously the processing time is going to be longer. The same thing goes for decision letters. I pulled information from the earliest that I could find was 2006. The initial decision letters were 1 page long, and now the decision letters are 3 pages long. There's 3 pages here, 1, 2, 3. So there's a much higher level of detail included in those letters. So those are 2 significant items that have changed. We also have more redevelopment. Increased redevelopment, which has resulted in more applications.
Anna,
Yes,
your redevelopment, do you mean homes themselves being renovated?
commercial.
Oh, okay.
Commercial redevelopment. And also, Reston Association began to follow the DRB application process for its own properties in 2014. So when I started, it was brought about that we needed to follow our own procedures for our own property. If we were going to ask members to submit applications for improvements, that if we were going to do the same thing for our own property, we should be following the same process. So now we're processing applications for RA property as well. And condo inspections in 2015, it was brought to our attention by council that for resale documents, we needed to do more than just supply documents. We also needed to do inspections, so that task was added to our workload as well. So those are the most significant changes that have occurred over time. That,
And is that because of changes to resolutions that the board has passed over the years, that the application length has increased so, and decision letters have increased so?
I think it's been, I would say that it's been, from my perspective, from what I see, it would be, from the decision end, I would say, because it also affects the meeting minutes, because the more detail was added to applications and decisions, the more detail was added to the meeting minutes as well. I would say it was, at some point, some staff at that time just determined that more detail was needed. And I don't know if Richard or Neil can provide some input as to what has changed in that over time,
I
but
think we found ourselves in legal committee too often with things that were misunderstood or not clearly spelled out. It was deemed safer to be more specific. And then there's a lot, I just want to point out too, there's a lot of boilerplate language that makes those decision letters longer. A lot of that stuff is not, actual to each particular application. But, over time, I think it's always been obviously an attempt to be clearer and better. But in terms of the time factor on staff, that's now under scrutiny as a result, perhaps. So that, we agree though, and imagine, this is jumping ahead, I know, but we think some of the has gotten way more tedious than it needed to have been, would be my guess.
yeah, I think it's gone from one extreme to the other. I would not propose that we go back to that early day where the application was just stamped, because I can tell you that we oftentimes need to go back and refer to those early applications and look for some of that detail and have nothing. Some of those applications have no attachments. Sometimes we look for a survey, for example, and see that it wasn't attached, and now we find ourselves at a loss for some of that detail. So I'm certainly not proposing that we go back to that, but I think maybe a compromise of somewhere in the middle, possibly, would be helpful.
Yeah, I think, as Neil sort of said, previous CEOs have been more concerned about the litigious nature of our society these days, and basically wanted to cover our tracks a little bit more, and I think that layered up, increased the size of the bureaucracy, and certainly increased the size of your workload because of what you had to do to basically guard against future lawsuits or whatever else came along. So I think that was a large part of it. It was protective as much as anything else. Yeah, CYA, thank you.
Yeah. Any more questions? So it just came to our attention a few weeks ago that there was actually a study done in 2006 of the Covenants Department. So this has come quite helpful now based on these conversations. So BDO was hired in 2006 to assess the effectiveness of the processes in the Covenants Department, the efficiency of the organizational structure and the roles in the departments. So they performed the assessment, analyzed the processes and the tools and technologies that might need to be implemented to improve the efficiencies. There's a lot of information. I obviously won't read everything, but I wanted to give you some highlights and again, bring this to your attention because much of what's in this study is really reflective of all the conversations that have been had as of late. So. Some of the findings, there were 14 positions in 2006, which is only one less than we have today. So some of what else they found was there was high turnover. They found that there was no standardized training. Retention was a serious issue. There were limited incentives for team members to perform at a high level. There was not a follow-up measure in place for resolution of violations. Significant manual and duplicated efforts, and they they noted that there wasn't competent and effective leaders on staff. So I think they found that there was management in place, but not necessarily leadership. So some recommendations that they put forward is to clarify goals and missions for the department because they felt that there weren't any common objectives. And so I've put asterisks in place where as I went through this study, I realized that while the majority of this was not implemented, unknowingly to us, we actually did implement a couple of these throughout the years. So the Governance Department did put forth a strategic plan in 2006. It's going to expire in 2020, so this year we'll be due to put together another one. They thought that we should improve the department performance level, adjust staffing levels, and slot people based on their skill set, implement organizational performance incentives, and implement measures to motivate and assess performance, implement value-based compensation, salary and compensation based on overall value and not tenure, and revise the recruiting process. In the past, they had been recruiting as generalists, where they needed to find people that had more specific skill set for these positions, which I think that's been our problem as well, is that it's really hard to find people that have the specific skill set for this industry. Emphasize accountability, increase accountability at the individual and team level, develop training, standardized training specifically, and create a comprehensive training manual, which we have done that since, obviously, in the last couple of years. Conduct leadership training to put forth effective techniques for mentoring staff, guiding the team, to meet the organizational goals and motivating staff for success. And they also recommended that they modify the departmental structure, roles, and responsibility. So they suggested that there be teams, units, as they called it back then, in place, a residential unit of field inspectors and advisors, a non-residential unit of field inspectors and advisors, committee meeting unit, an outreach unit, a temporary backlog team, and a POA unit. So a committee meeting unit was implemented because we do have a unit, basically a unit or a team that handles DRB, Governance Committee, and Legal Committee. At one point, there was an outreach staff member that was hired, so there was someone in that position, but that individual passed away, and when she passed away, that position was not replaced. And then the POA unit, so we have a resale team now. Until 2016, the resale orders were actually handled, it was dispersed amongst the advisors. And we determined it was best if we actually centralize it into one team, and that actually has been a really good decision, because as you distribute it amongst the advisors, sometimes there was inconsistency, but at least by having it within one team, there's a lot more consistency in the inspections. They also recommended a lot of technology features, increase automation for inspections, and leverage web technology, provide a web form for the complaints and for submission of design applications, provide web access to case status information and web access to guidelines, standard tools and templates for design and covenants, clothing, and streamline the POA resale information. So we've automated inspections. We have mobile technology now. We've standardized a lot of our tools and templates because we have a database now for design and covenants. And we've streamlined the POA resale package. We've just implemented a new software for that in late 2018. So we've done some of that, some technology. We haven't implemented all of that, so we do still need to improve on a little bit of that. Improve committee meeting support process, transition committee information to electronic media, which we have done. Minimize site visits by Covenants Committee members. I'm not really sure how to determine that, because I do think that's necessary. But I think this other comment that they made, most other organizations do not have the repeated iteration of correspondence and inspections before taking formal action. If RA can amend its rules in this area, it would likely improve overall response and customer service, as well as reduce redundant effort by the Covenant staff. I think as I mentioned at the board meeting last time, I think a lot, or the majority, if not all, of what we do is mandated by the governing documents in the deed. So unless some of that was changed, or all of that was changed, through a referendum, we're really tied to what we do from our governing documents. So, like I said in the beginning, we have to meet the guidelines and the deadlines that are mandated in the governing documents as well as the Virginia statutes. So we don't get to pick and choose what we do. We basically are here to execute on what's been set forth in our own documents. This isn't really all about an overworked staff. We're really just trying to execute correctly and adequately. So we just want to do what is right by the organization. I want to go back. Did anybody have any questions about the study? It's, it was, again, I have the study. There's only, a copy and hard copy. It wasn't like a disc or, it wasn't a soft copy. But, if anybody has any specific questions, I'm more than happy to provide that.
Madam Chairman?
John?
Anna, you mentioned significant turnover each year. Can you say what the annual turnover rate has been in the last couple of years?
Well, I would say that, I don't know that it's been the same every year. I think last year and this year's have been more significant, but I would say it's been about 30%.
30%.
Is there a theme to why you think that's happening? It feels high. Is there a theme? Is it better opportunities? I know there's a lot of different homeowners associations, this is a competitive thing. Is it they're moving to something else? Is it they're burned out? Is it this is a stepping stone job to something else? Any thoughts?
I think primarily it's been for better opportunities. In a couple of instances, it's been, life issues, insurance or somebody moving or family issues. But I think for the most part, it's been other opportunities, going somewhere else to gain a significant jump in salary. So they felt like unless I go somewhere else, I'm never going to get that increase in salary if I just have to wait for my yearly increase.
Right, you move to get your raise. Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
So this is what I've listed as the 2019 temporary changes that are needed in order to get us by with the current staff. At this point, we have only 4 employees that have been here, I would say 5 years or around that time. Everybody else is fairly new. We have 1 employee that actually has been here 6 years, but started in member services in 2013, but transferred over to our department after some time. So he's been with our department 3 years. For the most part, the amount of seasoned employees that we have now of 6 or more years is 4.
And can you break that down in terms of leadership? And are you in that 5 years?
Yes.
And less?
Yes.
So.
Well, yeah, I should say 5
who are
years.
the
I should say, I'm sorry, I should have said 5 years or more.
Who are the long-term people, if you?
So, I listed them because I figured you might ask. So we have Margot has been here 8 years. Trevor has been 7 years. Talia is the committee manager. She's been here 6 years, and I've been here 5 years. And like I said, Vern is one of our advisors as well. He started in member services and then transferred to covenants. So everybody else is in the 3-year range or less.
Should we comment on these now, or you want to wait till we get to discussion? Should we discuss this now, or you want to wait till we get to the discussion?
Let's wait till we.
Okay,
get
we'll
to
wait,
this.
we'll wait.
So in this case, based on the availability of staff that can do the tasks that, you know, are needed to be done, right now, we can staff one full DRB meeting and one panel meeting. In order to have one panel meeting, we would need to start it earlier, just so that we can increase the items on the agenda, and try to get everybody reviewed when they need to have their application reviewed. We had discussed at our earlier meeting with the design review board members last week that we were suggesting we edit some design guidelines to allow some more projects to be done without application. I have a list in the packet, I'm sure you've seen it. Really, that list of guidelines is based on the fact that there may not be a level of review for submitting something without an application. Or there may be a level missing, or we would like to see members, be able to do a project without application. It's just a combination of things, but that was the list, and that was the ask that was being made. And then we started a project 2 years ago to digitize all the cluster standards so that they're available to the clusters, the cluster boards, as well as the members primarily, because right now they're all in binders. It's one binder per cluster. There are many members in their clusters that do not have accessibility to that information online. So it's not only helpful for us, but it's also helpful to the clusters.
And I have just one quick question. It might have been answered in prior slides. But when you look at the number of applications, how many of the actual applications are coming a result of a homeowner violation versus a homeowner that's deciding to redo their landscaping, change their deck design or something like that? How many, is there a grand percentage associated with one or the other?
We're not able to pull the statistics specifically, but I can easily say that it's about a 60-40, 60 for projects and 40 from violations. And most of those violations for design review are actually coming from resale inspections.
Okay.
Yeah. Wow. And one of the other things that we're incurring, which is an additional issue that we face, is that during resale inspections, oftentimes we come across existing projects where people have, we note that there's a project that's been installed without approval, and now individuals are trying to go to sale and want to get that project approved quickly because they want to go to sale. And sometimes those projects aren't at a level of review that we can approve quickly. And obviously, some people don't want to wait to be scheduled to a panel to get that approved because that could delay their settlement.
To that end, have you seen, I would assume that there's been a significant jump in resale over the years, just the nature of the age of the community, I would suspect. Would you agree with that statement?
Yes, it's been growing steadily, absolutely, yeah. It's, if you have your packet, I know that it's hard to see here, but there is a slide that has the resale orders over the last 5 years. So from 2014, we had 876, and in 2018, we had 1,111, so it's been a growth of 300 and some, so. And of course, that's all driven by the market, so. So I was here. So we went over that. This is the list of guidelines that we had reviewed and suggested review and edit. And this is the list of 2020-21 budget projected needs. I know not everybody is, versed into technology and looks at that as, primary needs, but for us, technology does improve the workflow and the efficiencies. So I did make a list of those. Upgrades to the covenants design and violations tracking software. We implemented a new system at the end of 2015 that's definitely helped our process. But as with any software, as every year passes, you have to upgrade the software. And because it had to be customized just to meet our own specific requirements, it requires that consistent customization. We need a PDF converter software for the ability to update current design guideline documents. The current one that we have is not working adequately, and so it makes updating of design guidelines very cumbersome. And software integration between covenants and finance for automated update of new units, unit owner information. So whenever new owners come into the association and a unit sells, information is funneled through finance, and then that information comes over to covenants manually, and then we manually have to update that information into our two systems, which would be the resale system and our database system for architecturals and covenants. So if we had an integration between the two systems, it would be a daily import of that information.
Anna, do you have any idea how much all of that costs?
The integration, I believe that finance department is currently getting that estimate.
So we really don't know the financial impact
Of the integration, no, I don't. Do you know, do you have any update on that? No, yeah. I know that they're looking, I think that's something that would come through the member suite software that they're working on. Yeah.
Is that the only one that you think has a separate financial impact? Are the others being covered within current?
No, I believe everything will have a financial impact. I don't have costs for all of them, but yes, everything will have a financial impact. Ability to provide members links with photos to their violations. We currently now have that in the resale packets. That was just made available to us with the new program, and that's been very successful with the owners. When we send out violation letters, right now it's just text, but being able to give them the actual photos of the violations would be very helpful to them. And member access to the property files online. That was the initial intent when we purchased the SmartWeb software and when we digitized all our property files. The intent at that time was so that we could actually integrate that into the website, and being able, you probably remember, Julie, is that the members could actually see that information online through the website integration. And from a staffing standpoint, based on the conversations that we've had and what is needed, we've listed a full-time inspector that could really concentrate on a lot of the rechecks for violations that stem from resales, as well as helping with the walkthroughs. A full-time cluster specialist in outreach. That person would primarily spend their entire time on updating cluster standards, help clusters with whenever they ask for them to attend meetings, their own meetings, communication with clusters, applications for cluster standards, as well as applications for members that apply for things that are non-compliant with the cluster standards, and a full-time advisor. And 2 vehicles, since we're being asked to do more inspections. Michael Boss said earlier that we had this slide at the end of our packet, and I want to touch on this in terms of why this was proposed. Walkthroughs for use and maintenance violations only. The intent for this is that the use and maintenance violations are the ones that primarily provide the physical aspect of the property and are the most visual impact on the property, is the curb appeal of the property. The design violations, a majority of them do get picked up during the walkthroughs as well as the resale inspections. In terms of the visual aspect of the property, and I'm sure not everybody would agree, but whether or not a light fixture is square or round, for example, or whether it's a particular color, most people would not, by driving by or walking by necessarily, as long as it's in proper upkeep, they would not necessarily deem that to be improper maintenance. So the design portion of the walkthrough is what is the most time-consuming part of the walkthroughs, because once we do the inspections, the staff has to come back to the office and research everything that's been previously approved by the DRB to ensure that whatever exterior improvements have been made were previously approved by the DRB. Whereby use and maintenance, they can do the inspection, come back to the office, and issue the letters. So the reason why this has been floated out there is because we've been asked to do more walkthroughs. If we do walkthroughs for use and maintenance only, we are able to do more walkthroughs. But if we do walkthroughs for use and maintenance and design, that definitely limits the amount of walkthroughs we can do on a yearly basis, because they do take so much more time. And that is what I have.
Thank you, Anna.
And I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, so we have a really large group, and I'd like to try and keep all of this organized. I'd appreciate, like, don't talk over each other. I'll recognize somebody to speak and kind of speak on topic, and then be done so we can get to the next person. Maybe if we can each speak for 3 or 4 minutes and then let someone else speak. That works for everybody? We're good? Okay, first hand up gets called.
Why not? Why not?
You just have to hit me.
Yeah. Okay. Excuse me. I think the most important thing here, I appreciate Anna's presentation, and we're all kind of in the same boat here. We're trying to figure out how to make all this work. My concern after being on the DRB for 20 years is that I think it provides an incredibly valuable service to Reston. And to start changing its process really concerns me. And I think I invite all of you to come to a DRB meeting. Most of the RA board, I don't believe, has ever been to a DRB meeting, and get a better idea of what it is we do. And I think that's really the crux of this whole situation, that I hope when we leave tonight, we have an understanding the DRB remains intact, and we'll find other ways of channeling and working with Anna, staff, and so on. I think in the last several years, in order to maintain sort of a consistent service to our members, the DRB has been working, not day and night exactly, we're overpaid too much to do that, like the RA board is, right? But some of the things we've done that we touched on briefly, the whole process has kind of changed a little bit. Now we do digital packets to reduce time for assembling and hand delivering packets. When I first started this, you would be bought an envelope this thick of all the papers and applications and stuff, and it would be dropped on your doorstep Friday evening for the next Tuesday's meeting. And that's now simplified somewhat. It's still a lot of work to get to that point. We do consultation digitally now. In other words, if you all understand where Anna started, there were 4 levels: staff only, staff with 1 DRB member, a panel with 3 DRB members, or the full DRB, which is the whole gang here, okay? Consultation now comes to us electronically. The applications are looked at. A synopsis of each application is given to us with a recommendation from staff. Sometimes you get 8 or 9. Earlier this year, we were getting as many as 20 every week. We suggested in the meeting we had the other day that perhaps, and this might help with training, that instead of doing it digitally, we would be happy to come in, sit with the new staff member, and go through the applications, so they don't have to take an application, read it, try to figure out what to do with it, try to go through the guidelines, come up with a recommendation, send it to us to review, and it comes back. If we just came in and said, don't do anything, just give us the applications that need to come to consultation, we'll sit with you, staff, and we'll go through it. That way, we're helping you guys train, okay? That was just one small thing we thought we would do that wouldn't interrupt the normal process. At some point, we limited the number of agenda items down to about 10. We used to have 12, 14, and sometimes we would be sitting here until midnight when we were over at Isaac Newton Square. I mean, those were the good old days. We never got candy then. The earlier start time, we'll get to that in a second here, but
If you're nice, you might get them.
I was just kidding.
Great.
But
10 p.m. cutoffs for candy.
the earlier start time, I'm going to get back to that in a minute, and the staff and the suggestions for meetings. We used to start at 7:30. We decided we could start at 7. Coming any earlier than that, we've had this discussion for the last 10 years. It's nearly impossible for the applicants, and not just us, because some of us actually still work for a living, to get there by 6 o'clock. So the 6 o'clock thing, we batted this back and forth for years, and finally it's like, we just can't do that. It's not fair to applicants. If they work in DC, they want to come out, they'll never get here by 6 o'clock. So anyway, just comment on that. We've eliminated 4 months have 5 Tuesdays. So we've already eliminated, like 3 or 4 years ago, we eliminated the 5th Tuesday. So already we've eliminated 4 meetings a year right there. There's less staff photography, final review. The application that got rewritten last year, I guess it was, went from 2 pages to 7. I think we need to revisit that and see if it really facilitates staff's work, okay. If it doesn't, I think we need to take another look at that. Okay, then, the comments that, and I'll let anyone else talk, but the 2 meetings a month, 1 full meeting, that's usually for commercial projects, the larger development projects. Anyone that has an appeal then comes to the full board. That's what comes to the full board, okay? Doesn't sound like that's gonna change much. It's still gonna be at 7 o'clock, okay. Coming back to 1 panel meeting starts at 6. You already heard what I feel about starting at 6 o'clock. It just doesn't work. We have 9 members, only 8 now because we're waiting for you guys to appoint a 9th. We have 8 members. Now, theoretically, that's 3 3-member panels. If we go down to 1 panel meeting a month and say the first 3 of us here are on that panel, frequently we'll ask an applicant, well, we don't quite have enough information. This panel will be here next month, same time, same place. Can you come back next month? If we only have 1 meeting a month, the next month will be the next panel. And the month after that will be the next panel. So an applicant would have to wait 4 months before they got back to the original panel that heard their application. That just, I'm sorry, this won't work, period. And with the number of applications we have, I don't see how you can get that all into one meeting. If our average is 18 per panel meeting, that means that panel meeting, the one is gonna have like 24. That's just not workable. The other thing we did last 2 years was we went through all the guidelines and changed roughly 100 pages of guidelines to add things that staff could do without dealing with the DRB to streamline it. So they're asking us to do that again. Maybe we can find more stuff, but we went through, that's a lot of changes that we did in the last 2 years already. I'm not sure what else we can find, but we're doing what we can to simplify it. But I think somehow, and again, anything we agree to, please understand, we think it's only temporary. This is not something that's gonna go on forever. We know how things work around here. Once something changes, it never changes back. So we wanna be real careful about that. So, I mean, at a minimum, I think we had, one of the other things we talked about was if we could cut off 1 panel meeting a month, which we've already done. June and July, we're only gonna have 2 panel meetings, normal time and so on, and hope that can work. And hopefully, by 3 months from now, we'll be back to where we were now. You know, that the DRB can continue to function as it has. Now, there's this other whole side to it, which is covenants, which is, out of the 15 people that work in covenants, which say 4 work for the DRB, that means the other 11 people are just swamped. And that's a whole separate issue from the DRB, but it's still all covenants. And last thing, and then I'll shut up, Reston is a big organization. It's a big homeowners association. We got, over 60,000 people live here. One of the main services we provide is design review. It keeps up property values. I mean, the list goes on and on. That's what we do. And if all of a sudden we stop doing that, it's just gonna be bedlam. I mean, we just can't have that happen. Anyway, I'll be quiet now.
Next person? You guys are really
Okay,
quiet over there.
I just have a couple
Go ahead,
items.
Charlie.
One of the items that Ann mentioned was doing a 4-fee pre-POA inspection. And my thoughts on that would, rather than hire an employee, see about a contract firm or person, bonded and licensed, et cetera, how much would they charge to do, and then set the fee based on that, and not put it in our hands at all, as far as having another staff member, let it fluctuate with the need, because I don't know, maybe About a third of the people are gonna be willing to pay $50, $100, whatever the number is, to ensure that that's cleared up before their property goes on the market. How many we had recently where the people were scrambling to get their items cleared? Oh, they're closing tomorrow. Well, you won't get your letter till next week, sorry about that. I'm sure there's people that would be willing to pay to do that, but rather than take it upon staff, look into hiring a contract employee or a contract company to do that. The other item, and I live in a single-family, non-cluster neighborhood, and I can say older because I am. A lot of the older members are leaving, and when the new folks come in, buy up these houses, they're not Restonites. They don't know what Reston means. They don't understand Reston. We have an education problem. They don't know the rules that they have to follow, and a lot of times they don't care. And so I don't think the things are going to get better as we see this greater and greater turnover of the older folks downsizing, moving out, whatever. Our neighborhood has seen maybe a fourth in the last 5 years of turnover, just because of people. We don't even have big houses, but people are downsizing to smaller things. The other quick item I had where we were talking about fitting people in for these meetings. And I'm not sure it's possible, but when the letters go out, if it would be possible to schedule the members that your interview, if that's the right word, will be between 7 and 8, or your interview won't be from till 8 to 9, or 9 to, God forbid, 10. But rather than have the people sitting out there for 2-3 hours, it's just not right. They get grumpy. And I don't know, how close we can come to scheduling, but I think it would be helpful to the members to know that, well, my name's lower on the list. I don't need to be there at 7 o'clock just to sit for 3 hours. That was my only comments. Thank you.
You had a presentation or something you wanted to do, right?
I wanted to let your colleagues have a shot, but I'd be happy to go a
Why don't you
little bit
go ahead,
into this.
Ken?
Okay. One of the things I'd like to do, Jessica, is bring up second. Is that 9339?
Yep.
This is going to be quick. Yeah, pretty much less words. I'm sharing my screen, which is, this is my view of Reston. I've logged on to the RA website with my credentials. So this is my view as a homeowner to what Reston gives to me electronically. Just to give you an idea of my background, I've spent 30 plus years in the IT industry. The last 10 of those years were at Microsoft, managing their public sector programs. We designed war rooms. We put together critical performance indicators in senior executives' offices. So I think I know what we're talking about with regard to what folks like Hank and staff and the members need. I've sat on your side for 10 years. I joined as a committee member when we were all over at Isaac Newton Square, was elected to the board, eventually elected as president. Worked with that seat, went through 2 CEOs myself. So I recognize the internal systems and goings on with regard to Reston. And I'm just going to give you a little example here. In fact, I'm very happy that the main website is showing my home and my domain. And just recently, I got a notice in the mail. In fact, I was on my honeymoon at the time. I came back to a letter, and then I had to go over to the post office to get a certified letter. And what I received were over 16 pages of documents explaining an issue that I had, or that Reston had with my property. It's the fact that I had 2 umbrellas. 16 pages, a letter in the mail.
I see 3 on there.
Hey.
Don't count the ones in the mimosa.
We got it easily rectified. when I went to my account to see if there's anything I can do electronically, and mind you, sorry about the performance of your site.
It's your site too.
It's
our
Microsoft,
site.
it's Microsoft Internet Explorer.
This is what I, as a homeowner, get to see with regard to that violation. I can see that, well, I can deal with the account home where I'm already there. I can pay my assessment. I can look at my profile, which is basically my home address. My changing of password, that comes in handy. I can look at my order summary. If you go through this, it shows that for the last 9 years since RA went electronic, that I paid all my assessments and all my boat fees. That's good. It doesn't know that I've owned 4 properties in Reston. I've been in violation 3 times in that entire time. I moved to Reston in 1986. I've owned 4 properties, and I have been in violation, had to deal with covenants and DRB 3 times. None of that's here. You have no idea, I have no idea where I live, there's no map, there's nothing, and there's no ability for me to communicate or deal with anything else about who I am as a homeowner with regard to Reston Association. The most I can say is, you know what I've ordered, and I can change my password. And so when Anna puts up a slide and says technology is rather critical, I think you better start taking it seriously. Because when I was elected to the board, one of the things they put several of us in charge of with staff was an IT survey. This was done in 2010, 2011. In fact, you'll probably find it in the archive somewhere in Reston.org. None of it was ever adhered to. Never, none of it, a little bit of it has. I'll take that back. Some of it has. My point to all of this is that when I listened to Anna, and I really feel for Anna and what's going on, but what I heard over and over again is staff time to process, document preparation to process, checking of documents for processing, issuing notices, and overall time of processing. What's the common theme there? Heck knows. It's process. We have inherently some issues internally. I think you do have a staff crisis. I think if you look at what has happened to your budgeting over the years with regard to your benefits and your salaries, what have you, I think you need to take another look. Because while I think you've tried to deal with the issues of protecting our homeowners' assessments, you've unfortunately maybe have had an impact with keeping good staff. And I would ask that you look at that carefully because I think that's going to be a long-term issue you're going to have to resolve. But most importantly here, what can the DRB do with regard to the process? Well, we can go back, as Richard has pointed out, we can go through the guidelines and see what else could be given to staff to do. But what is staff going to have to do? They're going to have to process these. I say that's nonsensical. So I think somebody, I think when we saw the statement come out, there was a summary done by BDO in 2006. I highly recommend you call them back. They have a strong business process reengineering consulting arm. Let them come in and address your back office operations because right now everything is siloed. And I'll tell you, when the young people are moving in here and they go to the RA website and say, what can I do?
They don't like people.
There's nothing they can do except change a password and see if they can order something. And I would like to know everything that's ever happened. You need to know, when I call the main number, everybody should know everything about what Ken even has with regard to the Reston Association. What his involvement was, how long has he been here, which properties does he or she had. All these things, everything that you need to know about the homeowner should be made available to the homeowner online, but as importantly to covenants, as importantly to finance, as importantly to anybody else. None of that's happening right now. So 31 hours processing every week, I could see that. When you got to continue to do this over umbrellas, I get that. That's got to change.
I think when you talk about longevity on anything, I've been around for 9 months, Karen 10 months, Aaron 3 months, Tom 3 months, Doug 2 months,
3 weeks.
Ben a year plus. This goes back a really long, long time. And we're now in the position of, we don't have an open pocketbook. We have to prioritize all of these technology things. I'm the first person to tell you, I can't stand our website and I use it very little. But I don't know if you guys have any comments. I see this as gonna be expensive. I recognize we have to do it, but we can't, in just a few months, make up for everything that's happened in 13 years since 2006.
We agree with that.
That's the truth of the matter. So, Julie?
I just want to point out, I asked specifically for this meeting that the strategic plan that I remember Ken was still on the board when we did this for DRB. And Richard, I remember sitting at a table with you and Neil working through this, trying to say, how do we make sure that our community realizes what DRB adds to our life? It is inherently part of the Reston community, and it helps make us what we are. And there's, because Richard, you said something in your comments just now that raised a concern that perhaps you thought that the rest of the board didn't think DRB was important. And I don't think that's so. I think that what we haven't done a good job of is making the community realize the value and how DRB fits and how there's a difference with covenants and the use and maintenance. When I think about community feedback in the years that we went out and had community meetings, the members always bring up covenants issues and things that they'd like to see improved in use and maintenance. How do we facilitate and make things work faster? The calls I get as a district director, 9 times out of 10 are related to their home, their covenants, their neighbors, their environment. It's rarely do I get calls that have anything other than like Memorial Day when the pools weren't open. But that's kind of different. But I think about that and the need that we have to hold true to those goals and aspirations. And I do think, yes, we have a short-term problem. And I agree with Ken. I remember when I first joined the board in 2015, we talked about how can we accelerate the customer-facing IT, infrastructure that we have and the processing, and how do we ease up? Granted, Richard, I think that it's great that we got some 100 or so things done in the last 2 years at looking at the guidelines and facilitating some of those to be pushed off to staff, but there's so many more that I think that could be in that way. The last panel meeting I went to, I think it was just even this week, and the guidance given the members that came to that panel meeting, the interaction was great. It ranged from somebody who wanted to do, I think, a total renovation of their home, which I love that guy's design.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it was really good. To a cluster, I think, coming in, asking for making some changes to their guidelines. And at the end of the meeting, there was a new person there, not a young millennial, but asking, okay, I want to do some stuff. How do I do it? He actually came to a meeting asking, how do I do this to get my covenant stuff? To your point, I don't know that somebody could navigate through our website to figure it out. He actually came. So I think we have an opportunity here to right-size our staff, because I do think we need to right-size our staff and get back to the kinds of things that I think homeowners are asking for. And that's where homeowners help us keep our community looking good, feeling good, but don't hassle me on 2 umbrellas, maybe, because it's Ken. But, so there's just some of my thoughts.
Ken?
So I've attended DRB meetings, notably the time when you handled the Kensington request and you were able to fend that off. When you addressed Bizzuto, I was there. When you asked them the hard questions and they backed off. And I understand the value that Anna and her team brings in, because use and maintenance and keeping properties from going derelict is very important to keeping our Reston property values up. And I understand Covenants works hard and puts long hours in, and so does DRB. And you all bring value to the table. But from what I understand, the number one reason why people come to live in Reston are for the pools, for the fields, for the trails. And the number one reason why people leave Reston is because of DRB, design rules enforcements, and covenants enforcements. It's not just an emotional stance, there's actually a monetary impact. Because when there's a letter that's received by somebody who has paid off their homes, they bought their homes maybe for $60,000, lived within their means, paid it off, and now they are in their retirement living in fixed income, and then there is a bill or an estimate for $2,000, $5,000, sometimes over $10,000 to fix some of these issues that actually they did not even know was an issue. There have been cases when covenants have inspected a house and has okayed it, and the next time somebody from covenants came and inspected it, found some issues that was not discussed about by the first person who inspected the house. In fact, I was in that meeting, Best of Reston, a month ago. There was a group that got kudos because they go around fixing properties for covenant violations that Reston Association sends them letters for. So we were there in that meeting, and it was not a good feeling that RA was posed as somebody who actually creates these issues. So at the end of the day, if our membership is not happy, then I don't think it really is adding to the mission statement of keeping the property values up. I too come from a technology background. I don't think technology is the answer for this, because you cannot automate a process that has certain constraints or certain unsustainable amounts of manual process involved over here. About 6 months ago, Anna presented that there were about 300 data points, I think 300, even if it was 30, multiply that by 24,000 homes, 22,000 homes. That's an unsustainable number of data points that you have to collect and monitor for every house. And if you cannot administer justice uniformly, then you're not doing it properly. So the last time, and this goes back to when Robert Simon and the Reston way of life, those things 50, 60 years ago, whatever Mr. Simon created as the architecture became the rule at that time. And now people are not properly informed. Also, it comes to when people have to sell their homes is when the homes go through an inspection, and they don't really have an answer on how to solve the problem. But the last time I thought when Anna, I think Richard was there too, some of us from the staff, a couple of board members spoke, I thought there was a solution that is possible, which is, like Anna mentioned, to enforce use and maintenance, but when it comes to design rules, is to push the solution closer to the problem, which is let the clusters take more ownership of that issue. So the clusters work with the staff and the DRB in order to normalize and to take away any obsolete rule constraints, and to come up with a list of rules that the clusters know that they have to enforce on their residents. And since the clusters are closer to where the homes are, where the violations are, they can actually look at what the solution should be and keep the monitoring and keep DRB away from that, keep covenants away from that. So I think that could be an actual solution to not having us to have to continue to administer a process that we can see has not worked well for us. That's what I think.
Could we have somebody that represents one of the oldest clusters respond to that?
I'd sure like to.
Yes.
The clusters don't even have legal.
Sir?
Could you? Oh, sorry. Just some perspective here. I was a member of the Hickory Cluster Board of Directors for almost 10 years. Within that time, we tried to business process re-engineer many of our processes, from resale through design guideline violations, through cluster standard violations that ranged from replacing the original as-built design windows through building on cluster common area. We can only do so much. We are volunteers. You guys, at least the Covenant staff, gets paid for doing what they're doing. We get retaliated against by our neighbors next door because we are trying to maintain the architectural integrity, not only of the original vision, but for the reason people want to buy in our cluster, because they want the architecture, not the pools, not the walkways. They want the architecture. Now, that may not be the case in more generic clusters, but it certainly is in the architecturally significant clusters. So, I'm sorry to contradict you on that, but I don't think it's across the board, pools and footpaths type of thing. As I understand it, the clusters do not even have legal authority to enforce many of these things. There's an overlap with Reston Association on cluster standards, which we write, and I have written them, which which DRB then reviews and approves, and then they enforce and we enforce. But there are even inconsistencies there in the enforcement. So in many ways, the cluster's hands are tied. We are looking at the death spiral of our architectural integrity as things are missed. People don't do what they're asked to do. They don't follow the governing documents. Yes, education is an issue. There are lots of issues to address here. I don't think it's an unsolvable problem. I think it is solvable. But you've got to have a certain amount of respect for the architecture, because that's what many people coming here are buying. They want to live in mid-century modern architecture.
Neil?
So I would say, I'm sorry, I thought you were finished.
I'd be glad to, whatever you want.
I was just going to say that I think it's hard to prove the negative. When things are working well, you don't see them. The parts of Reston that are well maintained, we just take for granted, frankly. Although I think behind the scenes, design review is doing a lot of the work in keeping that way. We've been saying in our interviews with the RA board when we're reappointed for years that design review is more important now than ever. The original fabric is eroding. People need to make changes. When it's not consistent with the high design values, I think the community does suffer. And there are plenty of people that have lived 30, 40 years here in Reston. They haven't left Reston. They want to live here in Reston. So I just don't agree that people are moving out wholesale because of design covenants. And every new community that's built out along Route 50, Stone Ridge, any of these have strong covenants because it's proven that it's what people want. It maintains property values. It maintains a desirable community to live in. So I could go on and on about how I think design review is important. Getting back to the current staffing crisis in the sense of how do we retain staff and having some perspective there from being on the board. Spent a lot of time thinking about this over the last couple of weeks now, 2 or 3 weeks. I think the silos, Ken used the word silos, the silos of the department, and this is just hypothesizing for Anna and everyone to think on. I think the silos and having meetings managed within one silo has maybe had some unintended effects, even though that was a recommendation that came out of the report from 2006. I think previously there was an investment in that the advisors who are out dealing with the membership brought to the meetings. And when you divorce the two and you only have staff supporting meetings who aren't out there dealing with the actual applications, I think that's a dreary life to come to those evening meetings and deal with that And it's not a surprise to me that we don't have anyone staffing those meetings right now. So I would say that we ought to maybe rethink that. I think that certainly I can say factually that 15 years ago, the cohesiveness, the dedication, the camaraderie, the esprit de corps of the Covenants Department was 1,000,000% higher than what it obviously is today with 30% turnover. And I think that's because there was a connection between member service and design review, and there was a mission, and it was clear, and people bought into that, and it was a pleasure to work there. In terms of current meetings, just to speak to that, what I would like to, and I appreciate where we are. We met on this last week. We've got a real issue of how to provide member service through design review. I don't think this one massive panel meeting a month is a good way to go. Maybe it can last for 1 month or 2 months. It can't last more than 2 months. If we listen to 10 or 12 applications right now with 3 panels a month, that suggests we're going to be at 25 to 30 applications in that 1 month, 1 panel per month meeting. It just takes one contentious application with 4 or 5 affected parties, and that's going to be a bona fide 4 or 5 hour meeting. That's untenable. It doesn't work. The thing that works best about where we are now and where we need to get back to as soon as possible is reasonable length agendas. 10 or so applications is good. Yes, some meetings get done in quick as a half an hour. Most of them go an hour. Some of them go 2, and occasionally they go longer. Again, it only takes a neighborhood that's riled up about something, and we have a really long meeting. But this agenda length is important. You can't be piling on the agenda and thinking you're going to get through it in any reasonable amount of time, and that's bad member service. And just as an aside to one of Charlie's comments, we used to have assigned time slots in meetings. We got rid of that because we were moving through earlier agenda items, and it was actually making people wait around longer. So, after 50-some years of design review in Reston, I think, everything's probably been done at least once. I think unassigned time slots is still the best member service. But I just want to say, I think we need to try to staff evening meetings. I just want to say the toll road to me is a great example of what happens when design review disappears. If you've lived here even in the last 7 years, you've seen Reston disappear along the toll road. It takes about that long, because we've seen it, and this is a good development time, so, it might take a little longer if we're in a recession. But we also see it in the individual clusters. Just to say again, 60% of our clusters have nearly inactive boards. The Hickory clusters are very rare, and the DRB does defer to the cluster guidelines. We don't waste time, staff doesn't waste time on the clusters that already have good management. We just fly through that. It's all the other ones that frankly just don't have the volunteerism. That's where we spend a lot of time. But we've seen in these clusters, when they're not managed, it takes, again, 5, maybe 10 years, and then the property values are definitely diminished. The cluster looks run down. It's a crisis. And the passion that those of us that have been on this board, design review board, for a long time bring is feeling like we got our finger in the dike with redevelopment already eroding Reston. And to think that we're going to now give up more design review on top of that just makes, chills running up and down my spine right now that Reston is literally going to disappear. This community is not just about the pools and the lakes. If the architecture disappears, it's any third-rate Fairfax County older community. It's that simple. And again, if you don't believe me, look at the toll corridor, look at some of the clusters that have gotten run down. We need to continue to staff, we need to continue to educate, we need to find ways to run these evening meetings, which are where the essence of the member service happens. When we're face to face with our peers, we're passionate about this because we live here. And the fact is, a lot of staff don't live here. It's a job. It's not a very great job at that. I mean, anyone would have to admit that if you're not being paid fairly well to piss off homeowners, excuse my language, and telling people no, the fact is that in every cluster, in every neighborhood, there's that 4 or 5, maybe it's 1 or 2%, 1 to 5% people that don't get it, that want to do just crazy stuff, that are the property that, whether it's covenants or bad additions or whatever, you know, we do the best we can. We still miss things. But again, everybody notices the things we've missed. The things we've gotten right, I think, are the reason that Reston is still a nice place to live. I'm proud to live here. I think it's still a great place to live. I don't want to see it disappear. We've talked in the past, over the last 15 years, about defining the edges of Reston and knowing when you're in Reston. The people, long-term members of this metro area, know Reston as a special place. Just closing comment, again, it's 100% embodied in design review. It's why new communities everywhere have covenants, have design review. We're really big, so it takes a lot of resources. But if we let it go, I think we'll all rue the day. I would hate to be the generation or the year or two spell where 10 years from now they point back and say that's when Reston disappeared. That's when the board said design review could slip a little bit. That's when we decided we didn't need to staff up on design review. I think it would take about 5 years and we'd have lost Reston. That's what I really believe.
I just had one quick comment, if I could just jump in here real quick, to respond to your point of view about Reston and why people move here. I agree, it's not the pools and the tennis courts. Years ago, when I first got on the board, there was a woman that ran covenants named Margie Kruger, and she just said people know when they drive into Reston because it's different. They know because of our forest and our landscapes. We're an award-winning community for our landscaping, thanks to all of our landscaping staff. In 2004, 5, or 6, somewhere in there, they did a survey, an exit survey of the DRB. 95% of the people approved of what the DRB did that night, whether we said no to them or yes to them. So there was none of this horror of the DRB. Sure, we've been called the design Nazis, but anyone that's been to one of our meetings begins to understand that's not what we do. We do, I think, we keep talking about education. Ann and I have talked about it. The general population of Reston, I would say, and you guys can correct me if you think I'm wrong, probably 60% of the people that come to our meetings don't even know we exist. So I certainly don't think that's the reason they're leaving Reston. I mean, they're like, I didn't know I had to come here. You know, so no, I completely disagree with your read on what you think is good or bad about the design review board. People are not, you know, lemmings going over the edge of the cliff to get away from this horrible design review process. Everywhere I do work, I've been practicing architecture for 45 years now. I do work in Georgetown, they have a review board. Alexandria, they have a review board. Haymarket, Virginia, I was even on their review board for a while. Everybody has a review board. It's what keeps that together. It's what keeps property values up. It's not a huge negative. If we tell you no, you might not like it. You might get upset by that. But there's a reason why you're being told no. And I think we're probably saying yes well over 90% of the time when people come in. So I'm just disagreeing with what you said before.
I'd like to respond to that, especially because I've seen a couple of DRB, more than a couple of DRB members even take exception to me point out what is not without merit when I say that people are not happy with DRB and covenants. I mean, all you need to do is come to one of the listening sessions. We've had 5, I think we've had 5 a year. There's a repeated statement over there about DRB and covenants. And I ran 2 elections. Okay, and when you run an election, you try to see what people are happy about and what people are not happy about. And I can tell you, I have emails, phone calls that I receive, people pointing out to, what I would like to first say is that if we want to improve the process, we all have to come to the table as an empty bowl. You cannot, I understand you all are passionate about what you do, and this is what you do week after week for year after year for many years. But then you have to put that aside and think about this subjectively for a moment and see that if, first you have to be aware of the problem in order to come up with a solution to the problem. So first I encourage you to actually look at it and see that there is indeed a problem. The problem cannot be solved by technology, it cannot be solved by throwing money at it, because we have, like I said, we have, even if you have 30 data points, you have 22,000 homes, you just cannot staff in order to, and we are an $18 million enterprise, okay? So it's not so much about budgeting as much as coming up with a way to solve this problem. Now, Anna talked about how over the years, this problem has exacerbated. It has become more and more intense over the years, because initially this was not a problem 50, 60 years ago, because everything was new, nobody was trying to replace anything. But when I walk and talk to people, I've given 5,000 flyers in the 2 years that I ran for, like 5,000 flyers every year, and spoke to about 1,000 people overall, I would say. And there were cases when somebody had to change a storm door, or had to redo a chimney, and they did that. It got inspected. 10 years later, they tried to sell the house, and there was an inspection, and they got a violation letter, and now they have thousands of dollars in bills to solve that. And what I think we should do is look at this as to how does that let Reston be Reston? Maybe it does, but then how can we update the rules and constraints, and how can we have homeowners be more aware and help them and empower them to solve this problem? And if you want to have the rules, that's great. Let's keep the rules. I'm not saying don't have rules. But I feel that when we go against Kensington, we go against Bozzuto, and we are sort of, in many ways, not able to enforce a lot of what we think rules should be on them, right? We have the Aperture building that's almost right there on Wheelie. Like you said, we have lost Reston as Reston Lot 267, but we are not able to do anything about it. But our members who have signed the deed and said that they will live in Reston are now helplessly have to, in many ways, they don't have the same recourse that some of this commercial development seem to have against the DRB, and now they have to solve the problems the hard way. So I don't think it's on our membership to enforce this on them just because we can. We have to find a solution to this problem that's amenable to them too, that they can live with.
Okay. I'd like to disagree with one of your earlier statements. I've been on the Covenants Committee for 6 years now, and no one likes to be told to go mow the lawn by their father when they want to go play baseball. There's rules, sorry about that. If you don't like the rules, go live somewhere else. But the other thing I found when I first came on the Covenants Committee, we'd go down and inspect these million-plus houses down on the lake, and you could stick your hand through the siding. No maintenance had been done on some of these places. Now, these people aren't poor. Of all the houses we've inspected in the properties over my 6 years, yeah, there's 10% maybe or so of people that funds are tough. And there was a program at one time to assist those people. Sometimes it fell through because the same people needed assisting 5 years later again. But most people in Reston can afford to keep their property. It's because they are too damn lazy or they don't want to. We have them in my neighborhood, and I live in a beautiful neighborhood. I had a neighbor ask me, why do you put so much money into your house? He says, it's a big investment. You just let your car go without an oil change? It's a big investment. If you want to live here, it costs money. It's a fact of life. That's what keeps Reston.
Yeah, I just want to clarify one thing. I'm not arguing at all about use and maintenance. It's imperative that use and maintenance be enforced. That's not going back to Anna's presentation, use and maintenance absolutely has to be enforced. And in fact, I don't think even homeowners disagree with that.
A lot of them do.
But mainly, everything that I spoke to was in context of the design aspect, not the use and maintenance. Absolutely everybody, including the homeowners that were issued the violations, their neighbors, their clusters, they all agreed with that. Even the one that we had over 100 letters, the cluster that starts with a B, I forget.
Birchfield Woods?
Yes, yes.
So-
Even they agreed that all the use and maintenance type of violations were all valid.
Okay, Ben, I'm gonna have to cut you off because there are other people that want to talk, and you've talked a couple times now. Did you want to say something?
I'd like to, yes. I want to address a couple things. First of all, I agree with the gentleman who spoke as a former past cluster president. The clusters cannot enforce RA guidelines, and I know that from experience. And what that means then is the reverse, that RA can't duck its obligations under its deed, right? RA has guidelines for its membership, and RA has to enforce them or they need to get rid of them. Neglecting them, as we've done in the past with a smaller staff, really is an option. If we have the rules, we have to enforce them. We have to face them head on, not duck them. The truth about a function like DRB is that when it works, nobody notices, and we only hear the critiques when something doesn't go our way. And frankly, it's a healthy thing in a homeowners association if the biggest complaint you have is against the design guidelines, right? That means they're working, that means most people are happy, and the occasional person who's not maintaining their home is hearing about it, right? That's good, and I'm okay with that. I take a point that Neil made earlier. As Reston ages, the need for the DRB increases, not decreases, right? All of our homes age, right? The materials in our homes age, the condition of our property ages, all of Reston ages, and we need to keep it in shape. And so something that may have looked good 10 years ago now doesn't look good because, simply put, we live in Northern Virginia, we live in a forest, and things happen to our places, and it happens to my place too. The sum total of what I've heard tonight suggests we're chronically understaffed. We have got by in the past by simply not doing some things that we ideally should do. Cluster outreach, for instance. Proactive inspections of properties, for instance. We haven't done these things in the past because we haven't had the staff to do them. And 20, 30 years ago, when everything was newer, hey, kind of okay. Now, kind of less okay. And you're right, it's a sliding thing, right? It's like Ernest Hemingway said about bankruptcy, right? It happens very slowly and then it happens all at once, right? The deterioration of a community happens the same way. It happens very slowly and then it happens all at once. When you hit a tipping point and all of a sudden, nothing looks right anymore. Nothing looks the way it began to look. I moved here 21 years ago. I moved here on purpose because this was the only place that didn't look like the rest of suburban Washington, right? It had forest canopy, it had trails, it had parks. It had neighborhoods that had a sense of cohesion. If we have these rules, if we have these guidelines in place, we have to put the resources into them. We are in good financial shape now. We haven't been for several years. We are now. This is something we have to face head on. Do we put the resources into this? Do we scale back what our obligations are? We're taxing our members in the DRB. We're taxing our staff. What I'm hearing from Richard, Neil, and is there's simply too much work to go around. We either scale that back in a statutorial way where we say we're going to do less, or we plus up and we face that head on. And that's all.
Kathy?
Go ahead, John.
I'd like to offer 6 reflections. One is that I too attended all of the listening sessions during this past election season, and certainly covenants was the most frequently mentioned topic. However, it was not mentioned simply in terms of complaints about over-enforcement, but under enforcement. The second thing is, and here I ask our general counsel to lasso me in if I get out of whack here.
Lasso him in, Tony.
Get ready.
Get ready.
My understanding is that Virginia state courts, which put a premium on private property rights, are less than warmly inclined toward communities with covenanted communities. And that the poor enforcement of covenants opens us to the possibility that courts may rule that we may enforce none of our covenants. Thirdly, I think one of the problems we're facing, which has been mentioned by several other of our participants tonight, I think many new and even some older Restonians don't understand and certainly don't appreciate what it means to live in a covenanted community. And it's the covenanted community which allows us to have this incredible complex harmony of land uses that we call Reston. And if we fail in that, then we become simply a very large suburb or suburban subdivision. And we've already heard that Fairfax County would like to take over some of our business, in terms of parks and so forth. And then we would really be just another subdivision. It is the complex, rich harmony of land uses that makes Reston. So what are the solutions? 3 occurred to me. 1, obviously we need more staffing. Secondly, we need better technology because we're working sub-efficiently. And I would really like to see a study of what it would take to convert from a significantly manual record system to a fully integrated electronic system, both in our covenants management office and in field operations. Where do we stand now in that? How much time and money would it cost to do it? And what would be the overall cost benefit of such a conversion? I'd like to know that. The third thing, and I need to say this carefully so as not to be misunderstood, but I think I absolutely do not want to reduce design review. Absolutely do not. But I wonder whether we might not be more appropriately flexible about it. And let me explain what I mean. So I know nothing about architecture, except that I admire good architecture, or at least what the architecture that pleases me. But I have had experience as a zoning administrator in smaller cities, and I was the manager of zoning administrators in large jurisdictions. And it's sort of like the difference between generic and performance-based zoning and specific, unique solution-based zoning. So is it possible for us, for example, in matters such as colors, materials, to be more generic and performance-based rather than specific and unique solution-based? It's a question I have.
I can answer that one for you. Go look at the tall townhouses that are being built on Sunrise Valley, and that'll tell you how bad color can be.
Again, what I'm talking about is if one cluster 30 years ago has said, I'm going to use Sherman William White #1, that is one way to measure color. That's what I'm calling unique solution-based regulation. But is there a way to define the range of acceptable white in a way that doesn't cost us so much time to figure out what white someone might use? You guys know this better than I, but that's my question. And the final and sixth point is, how do we achieve those solutions? Well, clearly not overnight, but we have to finance it. And when Hank was interviewing for the job, he said, we need more revenues. and it can't be simply assessment-based revenues. And we're cheering him on in that effort. But I want to express a concern, because according to the 2013-2017 census summary done by the U.S. Census Bureau, there are 16.8%, an estimated 16.8% of Restonians who have a total household or individual, they do not distinguish in this measure, under 50,000. So some of us do not blink at spending another $50 a year. Others would be really cramped, and I think we need to have sensitivity about that. Thank you.
Also, some of the clusters have an assessment fee.
Exactly.
More than what we're paying
Much
into
more,
Reston.
sure.
And it's tough to,
do
single
both.
family, we pay Reston, that's it. But the clusters also have their own fee.
Aaron, you had something to say?
Sure, yes. I appreciate all that's also been said in the different viewpoints. I was president of a cluster as well, and to kind of address one of the questions you had, John, the way that the legal documents were written when our cluster was formed is it specifically laid out that we had to outline a paint palette that we had to deliver, and that then we delivered that to RA, and RA would enforce that for us. And when we had a neighbor paint her house a wild color, we had to go to RA and say, hey, can you please come enforce this, because we had no teeth. And so if we were to try and move away from a solution-based to a performance-based, not only would we have to change a lot of the legal stuff in RA, but we would have to go help each cluster make their change as well to get it all. So like you said, it's not going to happen overnight, but it's definitely worth thinking of. What I wanted to point out is that in the crisis like this, there's a quadrant that when you go to the management seminars and things, and they talk about urgency and importance, right? And you've got those 4 quadrants. I think we've landed where we are because we've ignored things in the important but not urgent category. And I think education falls into that quite a bit. And so we're really backed against the wall now, and we're working on the urgent and important things. And we're actually starting to cut bone away. And that's kind of the feeling that I'm getting here. So I would say as we're trying to look for solutions, let's see if we can expand that a little bit and find some innovative ways, whether it's getting on social media and getting a message going about, hey, this is what Reston means, this is what makes Reston so great. I mean, we could spotlight some of these great mid-century modern architecture and those sorts of things and say it's the covenants that protect this, right? We've got uneducated, I don't want to say residents, uneducated members of our community, and we could educate them. And then we've got these older houses that people need to have repaired, and they're just going to hire a contractor, and the contractors are definitely uneducated. They're going to come in, they're going to know what worked over in Silver Springs or here or there and say, oh, we could do this for you, and I've got a line on these windows, and yeah, they're not exactly like yours. And then when you go to sell your house, like me, you'll get the letter that says, that window's white. The rest of them are brown. You need to do something before you sell it, right? Yeah, that was on me, right? And I think anybody who sold a home in Reston has got a letter saying, yeah, you messed up. And we don't have enough staff to police and tell you, once a quarter that you messed up. And so you find out when the rubber meets the road and you're trying to sell. So I was thinking perhaps what would be useful would be an education document that says, hey, you're a Restonian, if you're getting work done, hand this primer to your contractor. Let's try and educate some of the guys doing the work so that we don't find these cases where somebody had something and it fell down and they put it back, but they didn't quite put it back right. And so now it violates design because the contractor had no idea. He just, these bricks were cheap and we're going to put it up and it doesn't match, and now you have to redo your whole chimney. So I think we can emphasize at least 1 or 2 of those important but not urgent things, and maybe give our members a way to participate more in what it means to be Reston and what it means to maintain a Reston property a little bit better. I think we have a unique opportunity now.
Thank you. Karen?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I've written education down about 5 times on my pad here tonight. And to that point, I think a full-time cluster specialist and outreach person could be of tremendous help in that area, because I know that's one of the big problems is communication between the clusters and RA. So we clearly have member dissatisfaction, I think. The things that I hear over and over again are, you know, the same rules aren't being applied fairly across the board to everybody. How come I'm getting dinged and my neighbor 2 doors away is not? The length of processing time, lack of knowledge, there's education again, and not being able to find information on the website. So, DRB, good thing, we want DRB. Completely agree with what's been expressed here before. One of our main jobs is to make sure that the integrity of the look of Reston is maintained. And people are buying into a planned community too, so they have to realize that. And there's obvious staffing issues with Covenant. So, I think a lot of things have been addressed tonight. I mean, I think with the turnover, if the turnover is indeed because people are moving on to better opportunities, which is basically better salaries, then we need to take a look at that if we're not being competitive. We have to do whatever we can to streamline the processes. I've only been on the legal committee for 2 months, but what has surprised me is some of these cases have gone on for years. And I mean, that's a whole lot of staff time being taken up there. And I don't know, in fact, BDO had pointed that out in their study. I think the repeated iterations of correspondence before any definitive action is taken. So I think we need to take a look at that. What else did I want to say? Salaries. I guess that's about it. But I think that what's going on here tonight is really good, and hopefully it will lead to some viable solutions to this.
Anybody else?
I'll keep it real brief, but just simply say, it was stated I've been on the board for 3 months. I've lived in Reston for 29 years, but we have a room full of volunteers right there. Most people don't even realize that. I mean, that in itself is awesome. We just have so many people who are involved in our community. Prior to coming to the meeting, I read about what was going on, and basically what I read, what I heard tonight is we're way understaffed. We just don't have enough people to take care of what needs to be done, so we need to address that. I'm going to defer to you guys. We're looking at it and you say, DRB, I've done this for 20 years, I've done it 15 years, whatever, and you've seen the patterns go back and forth. Well, let's listen to what you have to say and kind of make our progress along those lines versus knocking things out, because what we have here is really important, but unfortunately, most people that live in the community just don't care, unless it hits them. As soon as they sell their house and they go, oh, I got to deal with this, great. Otherwise, it's not an issue. So, as I said, I'll keep it brief, and that's what I have to say.
Yeah, just one thing.
Sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Bruce was first.
Well, I wanted to emphasize 2 things. One was, if we're dealing with an emergency, I think we recognize that we'll deal with an emergency. I also hope it's well understood that beyond the shorter term emergency, some of the things that have been pointed out, but this is just illustrative. The 7 o'clock start is really significant and this strikes me, and I say it all the time, we have the benefit on the DRB of professional architects. It's called for in our documents. We cannot take that for granted. We need to respect those volunteers, as well as obviously the folks who are coming to the meeting to address their individual issues. so from my perspective, it's very important that we have a process that obviously works for the staff, but is recognizing that we're getting significant benefit as a community. I'm not speaking just as a member of the DRB, from professionals that is very valuable, and we should respect that.
So I would just say, you know, for me as a board member, we start our meetings at 6:30, and there are several people who work full-time and make it a point to do what they have to do. So we're getting close to time. I just kind of want to see if we can summarize here, in that Anna's made an ask both of the DRB and she's made an ask of us. We have a meeting next week. We need to know numbers before we can even think about that. But I'd really appreciate if you would go back and think about this time meeting for a few months. You know, I don't know if we can get through it, Richard, by the end of July. I don't know if we can get through it by the end of August. I will shoot myself if we can't get through it by the end of September. But, you know, we need everybody's efforts in trying to get this. And if there's any way you can make some accommodations for a few months on time to help, that would be terrific. If you can think about some long-term things that you all can do. I came before the DRB in 1994. I bought a house on South Shore, you're familiar,
Yes.
On the courthouse steps. It had been abandoned for a few years. That's putting it mildly. My husband, I bought it on the courthouse steps from the IRS. My husband walked in and it was full of mold, and he looked at me and said, "You're crazy. I'll come back when it's all done." So my house was what they called Belgian block. It's now clad. I went out 15 feet. I added an addition, and I went up a whole story. My DRB application was 4 pages. I don't know what a house on South Shore is, their application is today, but I'm sure it's a lot more significant. People still like my house. I was on the home tour. So there's a middle road on that one as far as I'm concerned. So I'd really ask your help in trying to get some of these things straightened out. And, you know, we'll have conversations next week, but Michael.
Sorry, I just had one thing. I mean, I'm pretty new to the board. I was appointed back in January, I think. I'm also obviously younger. I'm the millennial coming into the community. I've actually now owned 2 properties in Reston. So the biggest pitfall I see is clusters, and I've lived in 2 of them that are decent on keeping their standards. But from what I've seen on how to solve the workload problem is if all the cluster standards, I don't know if the board can mandate each cluster. They all have not big bank accounts, but they have decent reserves that they should be required to update their standards within 2 years or something, because then that will lessen the applications that come. I mean, for the 2 houses I've owned, I've had to submit every single time for the exact same window that 40 other homeowners have in the house, and it has to go all the way through to consultation, I think is Windows consultation. So that just, and it takes time to set that up. So to me, it's not that we're getting rid of the DRB. The DRB would be helping these clusters create that updated documents. That's why I kind of wanted to join the board. I said I'd be the cluster liaison and go to the board. And, you know, I already actually met with Timberview cluster, which is a cluster up in North Point area, because they had an interest, and I had a contact there, and he said, "Would you be welcome to come to one of our meetings?" And I said, "Sure, I'll come." We sat there for 2 hours, listened to them, because they had one homeowner put in vinyl windows, the rest of them have wood, and they had no clue that you could get a cheaper wood window, or just little things in industry knowledge that I have as an architect that they didn't know. It helped them just for me to be kind of there to help them answer some questions. So I think clusters are key to helping lessen the applications, and that's all I really kind of had to say. And also to answer your question on the 4-page thing, Fairfax County permit, you used to only need 3 pages to get a permit. You now need 30. Sometimes you need 100. So, you know, when I'm putting together a set of documents, it used to be you could have 3 pages, but now you need 100. It's just the way we're, unfortunately, it's gone.
It's the lawyers.
So.
Yeah, Tony's fault.
What? I'm just sitting here.
Well said, well said.
Anna, do you have anything else to say?
I think I would like to add that our staff actually does have 6 individuals that do the requesting. So we do have staff that are requesting, so we'd like to have that in. Throw that in the mix.
Put them in the meetings.
Hank, do you have
No,
anything to
just
say?
because they've invested, I think they still would like to be able to have a life.
No, we don't.
Hank, do you have anything to say?
I think they're still privy to that personal life.
I think the only comment I'll make, and I appreciate everybody's give and take on this, is that the hair on the back of my neck does go up when there seems to be any disparaging of staff. And I'm the staff's advocate. I did read the 2006 BDO report, and which was essentially 15 years ago. And I just to support Anna and her group, they work incredibly hard. They are incredibly dedicated. And I don't appreciate it when it's implied that 15 years ago things were better, when in fact the report 15 years ago said it wasn't. So if we could just take that off the table going forward, I just think it's counterproductive. And I know it upsets the staff, and anybody on the staff who's watching, it would upset them. There's a lot of things that have gone wrong that need to be fixed. I think, Aaron hit the nail right in the head. It wasn't urgent, so it wasn't addressed. And it's going to take us. It took a lot of years to get here. It's going to take some time to get out of here. And we're working on a lot of the things you guys have brought up. But I really, if nobody else is going to stand up to be the shield for the staff, I'm going to stand up and do it because they work incredibly hard. And I really hope from this point forward, there's nothing that's ever implied that disparages how hard they work. They're an outstanding group of people, some of the best people I've ever worked with in the 25 years I've worked. So that's all I need to say. So thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to speak to that. I think we wholeheartedly agree. I think the staff has gone above and beyond the call of duty. And when I sat on that side for many, many, many years, I was the staff's biggest defender. Prior CEOs will tell you that. That gentleman there will tell you that. So I think you have that. What we're trying to say is they need to be enabled. They need to be in a good environment. They need to be paid well. They need to be given the things that they thought they wanted, that they were owed when they came here, that have been reneged on, taken away, what have you. So you too can defend them by fighting this board and future boards in terms of what has to be done to make sure that the staff is healthy and well taken care of, and you have a sustainable environment. We're a big champion of that.
There's a lot of things I can't tell you about right now that have already taken place, and we reported on at the next board meeting right along those lines. We are looking after and going to take care of this staff, and without this staff, we're nothing.
Agreed.
Yeah, we're done.
Anybody have any other comments? Barry?
Good.
I do, and
Okay.
I'm gonna harp on it again. I have listened to everybody talk tonight, and every time I keep pulling out the design review board strategic plan and the things that we aspired to and said we were gonna do together, wasn't just DRB, it was the full board. There's in here education, outreach, community, support revitalization, support our communities, and updating. If we just started to work on some of those like we had said we were gonna do together, we might not be limping along as we are now.
I just got here, so.
Still your fault.
It was 12 and 13 too, not 9 and 10.
Months?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
I just want to know what's the protocol on how many times and how long people can speak, because you told me last time that.
No, I was letting, you spoke 3 times. If you want to say something else before we leave. you
I just
can.
want to make sure that everybody
I only
is treated
spoke 3.
uniformly. But one thing I want to say is I don't think at the end of this work session, we really know an answer or know a step forward. So I don't know if you're going to have continuing sessions about this. We exchanged ideas and we discussed a lot of things, but I don't see a concrete set of steps on us moving forward to improve the situation.
Well, I said Anna has her ask, and we're gonna have to talk about it next week at the board meeting. So that's what we're doing. I'm asking them to go back and look at what they can do. This is a long-term work project. It's not gonna get solved, and there are gonna be many steps along the way that we're gonna have to address.
I think one comment, just to reiterate the importance of education and education outreach. It's something that I've seen over and over again at the heart of problems that we have in this community, whether it's the lakes, boats, and docks, and how little the clusters really understood covenants there, or the environmental work that I've been doing elsewhere. So I think that outreach position would be very, very important for helping solve this. And I want to also say that I think improvement of the website as a way of communicating with the members is critical, again, for a lot of the problems we have here in Reston. And that's all I want to say.
Can I just make one quick comment? Just one quick one.
30 seconds.
Okay, 30 seconds. The education, thank you very much. We've been discussing that daily, monthly, whatever. Last year, 4 of us wrote an article for the Reston magazine. Every time it came out, there was an article by one of us to do whatever we could to, this is development, this is Parks and Rec, this is whatever we're talking about. So we've been trying to do some things to get the word out that there is such a thing as a design review board, and this is what we do. You know, so anyway, time's up.
Julie?
Then I'm gonna speak one more time and I'm going to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Ah, she beat you.
I know, right?
Thank you all very much. Appreciate you coming tonight.
Our pleasure.
She was kicking me.
Madam President, point of order, you've got to take the vote.
Yeah.
No,
Oh,
yeah,
everybody.
aye. Anybody want to stay?
You were in
Yes,
your, you were in your
aye.
key
No.
vote, Tony.
Trump my seniority. I have my hands.